First of all, can I send my apologies from cold downtown Canberra? It's the price we pay for opening a government in this country. We've all got to go to Senate estimates, and when we were planning this, we always knew this was on the cards. So can I start by apologising for not being with you guys in person this morning? I also want to start by acknowledging all of you, if not me, are on the lands of the Kaurna people. The people of Adelaide. Can I pay my respects to them, their elders who are in the room, their elders who have passed, and those elders who have yet to come. I also want to pay respects to everyone in the room today for coming to this Reconciliation Week event run by Reconciliation South Australia, who've always been a great supporter of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this country, and I think it's really important that we all come together on weeks like this to just renew and refresh our commitments to reconciliation. My name is Mick Gooda. I'm the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner at the Australian Human Rights Commission. I've been in the job for going on, this is my 6th year, and racism is one of those issues that I've decided was a priority really early in my term, and I framed it around building a better relationship between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and the rest of Australia, and it allows me to talk about racism and also constitutional recognition, which I also want to talk about this morning. But racism in our country, whilst not the violent type of racism that we see in other parts of the world, it nonetheless affects all of us day to day. There's not too many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people I know in Australia who've not been affected by some sort of racist behaviour, whether it's not having flats or houses rented to you because you're black, whether you're getting abused on public transport, or the really insidious form of racism, institutional racism, where in places where I've worked, like WA, where there's a different form of dealing with people who die without wills for Aboriginal people compared to non-Aboriginal people, and we've agitated long and hard to have those little things fixed up, and lucky enough I think it has been fixed up in the last couple of years. So we deal with this sort of racism all the time, but today I just want to highlight a couple of things that have happened in this country I think that we can be really, really proud of. I was in WA when the AFL players, particularly Nicky Winmar and Michael Long, started to agitate about how they were affected by racist comments both on the field and from outside the boundary. We all remember Nicky Winmar picking his shirt up that day, playing Collingwood, and pointing to his stomach, like all of us feel like doing at times, about I'm Aboriginal and I'm proud of it. That's what that picture says to me, and subsequent discussions with Nicky really confirms that. But Michael Long, he was taunted on a field. The people in power tried to cover it up. Michael was one of those guys who just said, I'm not giving up, and kept on pushing it, and finally pushed the AFL into a position where they had to address it. Around that time, when they decided to address it, the leadership also came on board. People like Mick Malthouse, Kevin Sheedy, Terry Wallace, they started coming out saying, we're not going to pick players who racially taunt people on the field. It's not going to be a legitimate strategy for us to win games anymore, just racially abusing people. And we saw a great shift at that time, where we ended up looking at it in my last job as CEO of the Cooperative Research Centre, about the action the AFL took was unprecedented probably around the world, where we went from a fairly relaxed approach to it to being accused of racism on a field is probably the worst offence you can be charged with these days. So we've had sport really starting to set the agenda for addressing racism in this country. And it's got to the point where, you know, there's zero tolerance on the AFL field, and other sporting codes have followed suit, like the NRL, like Cricket Australia. So we're seeing the sporting codes, which I think is a really great function of sport in a society, to set those codes in a way that the rest of the society comes on. And we're seeing the next step on that, in that with, you know, spectators now, you know, pulling up other spectators about abusing players on the field, and we've seen that several times in the last few years. However, we still got a way to go. We still see one of our great heroes, Adam Goods, you know, one of the toughest men ever to play the game, being consistently racially abused, or reading the other day about Nick Natanui in playing for West Coast, being abused. So, but I think things are a whole lot better than they were when Nicky Winmar and Michael Long started their campaigns. And this weekend we see another great event, you know, Dreamtime at the G, Geelong, Richmond playing Collingwood. A legend regame it's becoming now. It's part of a tradition to have that, and before the game we'll do a little bit of a replicating Michael's long walk, when one day he just decided to pick his shoes up and get a lift to the outskirts of Melbourne and walk to Canberra without any preparation whatsoever, just to go and tell John Howard that he needed to do something about Aboriginal affairs in this country. So people will walk from Federation Square to the G on Saturday night. It's a great way of paying respects to Michael and then committing to the reconciliation effort. And when we looked at racism in the AFL back in the days when I was at the CRC, we saw a great over-representation of players coming through, and it's one of those over-representations as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people we can be proud of. The number of players now in AFL and NRL particularly, since the stand on racism was taken, you can almost track that over-representation to that day almost, when we've seen players like, you know, Morris Rioli, Buddy Franklin, Adam Goods, just to name a few of the superstars, but a whole lot of unheralded people now coming through playing the game. And I think I can put that down in my own mind to the stamping out of racism. And I want to come back to that before I finish, because I think there's some lessons where we have a racism-free zone to get there and make changes. But I just want to mention a little bit about one of the big efforts we're going to have in reconciliation the next couple of years, and that's constitutional recognition, where we actually get to vote in a referendum to say that there were other people here before 1788. And I think that's the time when Australia will really come to terms with its history and how it can actually be a mature nation in the 21st century, and the power of everyone who's eligible to vote in this country writing yes or no on a ballot paper to recognise us in the Constitution is going to be one of the most powerful things I can ever think of. And what a great opportunity we have in this country for this generation, the people who are here now, to get an opportunity to say yes on that Saturday, a couple of years away yet, I think, before we actually get to vote. So I think that's going to be the final act of reconciliation. I don't think we can all pack our swags and go away after that, but I think it's a good indication of that's where we'll be. But the final message I want to leave here is the lesson from the AFL, and that is, if we can produce zero tolerance on racism to produce this over-representation in the AFL and in the NRL, what happens if we actually start having a zero tolerance approach on racism in our schools and in our universities? Will we see a similar burgeoning of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students right through the school system, from year one right through to the top of the class in PhD candidacies? That's my dream. I think we can actually get there. And I think the challenge for us is to actually say zero tolerance to all forms of racism. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.